What's up, horror fans? We got a back-to-back Lastercast recording going on today. Both of them are coming up on our channel this Saturday morning. We just covered the final episode of Horror's Greatest on Shudder, and now Danny and I are going to talk about a topical topic. The Academy Awards are coming, and so we are going to talk about the 7 horror films that have been nominated for Best Picture, as well as just horror at the Oscars in general. So, Danny, I think a good way to start this would be, what are your thoughts on the Oscars in general?
When I was growing up, the Oscars were like second to the Super Bowl for me. I loved the Academy Awards. Uh, I I am a huge movie fan. I consider myself a cinephile, whatever that means, and
Yes.
I always try to, no matter the year, I always try to see all the movies nominated so that I can have like my ranking. Very rarely do my best movies of the year line up with the Oscars, but
Yeah.
sometimes they do. Sometimes they do, and that always, when that happens, it always makes me happy. Uh, but I don't think it's, the Oscars have always had a blind spot for horror. Um, and it has to do kind of, I guess, with the perception that horror has amongst critics. Very famously, um, Siskel and Ebert would basically shit on most of the horror movies that came out, with few exceptions. And when like the two most well-known critics in America are telling you every week on TV and in their reviews that this is a genre that's not worth your time, I think that, like, I think as we go through the movies that we're going to talk about, you know, there's, with a couple exceptions, there's always that urge to use other words than horror to describe these movies.
Right.
Um, we're on. I don't make a, my favorite movie of all time
Hmm.
is Jaws. Jaws is one of the movies that was nominated for Best Picture, horror movie that was nominated for Best Picture. Jaws came out 50 years ago, and we are still having the conversation on social media. Is Jaws a horror movie? When literally nobody would ever argue that any other Jaws ripoff, um, animal attack movie is horror.
Right.
Every Jaws clone, from piranha to alligator to grizzly to orca, all of them are classified as horror movies. But Jaws, the originator, is looked down on because it's Steven Spielberg, because there's an adventure element to it, because it's got an amazing screenplay with great actors. There's, I liked it. Silence of the Lambs is another movie we're going to talk about. Crime thriller, right?
Yeah.
You hear
Yeah.
psychological thriller, suspense movie. They'll even just start in the last decade. You started to hear, oh, it's a genre film. Well, aren't all movies genre movies? Like
Yeah.
Airplane is a genre movie. The genre is comedy, but
Yeah.
no. So there's always this idea of, and I've even saw that, and the impetus for this video is The Substance, directed by Coralie Farja, is nominated for 5 Academy Awards. Best Picture. She is nominated for Best Original Screenplay and Best Director. Demi fucking Moore is nominated for Best Actress, and it's nominated for Best Hair and Makeup. And I've even started to see online people trying to clap back. Oh, The Substance is, it's a social commentary with body horror elements. There's
Yeah.
never any other movies that get the with blank elements attached to it. that is a phrase that is only saved
Yeah.
when horror is attached.
Yeah.
Nobody ever says, um, Duck Soup by the Marx Brothers. It's really a political satire with comedy elements.
Right. Right.
Nobody says that.
Yes.
Nobody describes Ghostbusters as a comedy with science fiction elements.
Right.
But
Right.
Silence of the Lambs will get, oh, it's a crime thriller with horror elements. The Substance is a social commentary with body horror elements.
Yeah.
Jaws is an adventure film that has some horror, horror scenes in it, and you're
Right.
like, and it's the what's the word, like the way people will do like limbo to get around
Yes.
using the dreaded 6-letter H word
Yes.
uh when describing what are some of the greatest movies of all time, some of the best movies, movies that were nominated for Best Picture. uh it it gets annoying. So like I grew up loving the Oscars. I grew up as a horror fan.
Hmm.
Those two loves almost never meet, and then when they do, there's always this kind of like almost fight back of like, oh yes, we nominated this movie, but you
Hmm.
know so
Right. Right. And
I
make the
agree.
list. Yeah. Horror is
Yeah,
discriminated
horror is
against.
discriminated. it the funny thing is that horror has been proven, especially in the last decade, horror has proven to be one of the, if not the most marketable genre. Year in, year out, horror movies make tons and tons of money. They always go way over their budgets, even the bad ones. And I think that that's almost part of the problem, where it's like, oh, horror fans will go see anything. If Ouija can be made for $5 million and make $30 million and get a sequel out of it, well, then, you know, what taste do they have, horror movie fans?
Yeah. Well, one thing that I've just never understood, right, is what qualifies a movie to be Oscar worthy, or like this is considered an Oscar film, right? It's like it seems to have some kind of quality to make it a Best Picture nominee, whereas any movie of any genre can have amazing characteristics, and it doesn't matter what genre it is, and but somehow there's this kind of like very narrow lane of like what makes a movie a Best Picture contender, what makes a movie an Oscar worthy movie. And this year, just to kind of talk about the Oscars in general, Sherry and I watched many of the films nominated for Best Picture, nominated for Oscars, right? And um this year we feel like we haven't seen so much of what's nominated, you know? And what happens is there's these movies that come out every single year and we're like, "Oh, we have to see this." But it doesn't matter if it's fucking horror, sci-fi, it has like the actor that we love, or it has the director that we love. And we're like, "We got to see this because this person has made amazing movies before." It doesn't matter. Then there are these movies that come out that you're like, "Oh, they're making this because they think they're going to win an Oscar." There's that term, Oscar bait, where it's like,
Mhm.
"Oh, this feels like this movie's made for an Oscar." It's like the subject matter, 9 times out of 10. And believe me, I don't want to get into like, because Danny and I are super fucking liberal. We don't want it to come off like we're like the other side, this like right wing conservative movie review side. But I do feel like there are movies where they're like, "Oh, we're going to talk about this topic because this topic is going to get us an
I
Oscar."
I feel that sometimes the Oscar bait movies win. Like, I'll
Well,
give you
yeah, go ahead.
the classic one for me was Crash. And I don't mean David Cronenberg's Crash. I mean the one about race in LA, where that movie came out, and I've used this term on the channel before, sledgehammer movies. These are movies that, in my opinion, these are movies that have a message and they're going to beat that fucking message into you with a sledgehammer.
Right.
Instead of trying to just be subtle and tell a good story and allow you, the audience, to get that message, right? Now, sometimes a movie like The Substance, the whole point of the movie is to hit you with the sledgehammer, or more, maybe a blood geyser, where it's literally like, it's so in your face,
Right.
and it's done on purpose. Crash was the type of movie where it was not done on purpose. It felt like the writer of that movie was like, I'm going to say things about race that have never been thought of. I'm going to solve racism with this movie. And I felt like the Oscars bit hook, line, and sinker. Green Book is another example. I fucking hated Green Book. I teach US history. I would never use Green Book in my classroom.
Mm-hmm.
There's a scene in that movie where a white man teaches a black man how to eat fried chicken. And I literally, in the movie theater, went, are you fucking kidding me? And it won the Oscar. And it's like, there are Oscar bait movies that win, and that term is used for a specific reason. I think the movies that we're going to look at, and I think that one of the things that I love about horror so much, and we've talked about for 5 years on this channel, is horror is more than almost any other genre. Horror is capable of doing all of these things, teaching you about race, history, gender, bringing up important topics that need to be discussed, but doing them in ways that are incredibly thought-provoking, go outside the box, use incredible effects and behind the scenes teams of people to get that done. I think about like all the movies that I watched after we first saw the Horror Noir documentary, or Shudder had a series about queer horror, and how you go back into, it wasn't woke. The word woke was not invented the way it is now in the 1930s. But when you understand that James Whale was a gay man, you can look at Frankenstein and the movies that he made, and you could see them a little bit differently. And you could see that for a lot of filmmakers who
Mm-hmm.
are bringing ish. One of my favorite movies that we've talked about on this channel is The People Under the Stairs, and where like Wes Craven makes like an urban horror movie about race and gentrification, and he's got a ton of things to say in that movie. One of the movies we're going to talk about in a minute is Get Out. I mean, Get Out is as obvious in what it is saying as you can be, but it does it in a way where it doesn't insult the viewer. It doesn't hit them over the head. And I that's partly why it ended up winning an Oscar for best screenplay from Jordan Peele,
Right. Well, so I really love that you brought up this like idea of hitting people over the head with a hammer, right? Because I think what makes the difference between a genuinely good movie that people love to a movie that is trying to be Oscar bait, it depends on what's written on the hammer that they're trying to bang into your head, and then who's the one wielding the hammer. And I think that like Get Out is actually the perfect example of this, right? Because Get Out is all about race. It is all about race. But I feel like Jordan Peele, not for an instant did he sit there making this movie being like, oh, it's going to be nominated for an Academy Award. Oh, I'm going to make sure that I put this scene in here so that it can get nominated for an Oscar. There's nothing like that. All the movies on this list, there's 7 movies. They are nominated for Best Picture, but they are made by filmmakers that have visions and that like they would want to tell this story regardless if it would be considered for an Oscar or not. Regardless if it make a ton of money or not. It's just because they were excited about making this fucking movie, this story, and Get Out is the perfect example because like it's all about race and it is like all in your face, hitting you over the head, but it's not like we're telling you about race because we want to be noticed that we're telling you about race. Like, man, I'm sounding like fucking Ben Shapiro or something over here today. But like, there's that idea of like virtue signaling where people are like, we care about these things because we're good people. And you feel that with certain Oscar nominated movies.
I feel that's part of what Jordan Peele was calling out, in Get Out. Like I always think of Bradley Whitford going, I would vote for Obama a third time if I could.
Yes.
Like that line is so, it's like, it's comedy. It's like Jordan Peele is a comedy writer. And so there's that, like, a lot of the movie is taken from that like comedic point of view, but then it gets very dark and very serious. And I wrote down all the movies. I wrote down all their nominations and what they actually won for, if they actually won. Get Out was nominated for 4 Oscars, including Best Picture, but it did win for Best Original Screenplay. And Jordan Peele's was the first African American to win a Best Screenplay Oscar at the Academy Awards. So, like, it was an important win. And then, like, I don't know if you remember, but part of we're talking about the Oscars, but like award season starts at the Golden Globes, right?
Right.
And the Golden Globes has this really ridiculous thing where they divide movies into drama and then musical comedy.
Right.
And Get Out was nominated for Best Picture Musical Comedy. The Substance was also, I believe, nominated for Best Picture Musical or Comedy.
Yeah.
So it's like, huh? Like,
right. Well, that's that limbo that you were talking about before, trying to like fit something, into a certain genre. Yeah. I mean, I hate it. Like, they nominate like The Bear for Best Comedy for a TV show, and they nominate The Martian for Best Comedy, right? It's like, okay, what the you're just trying to get bored. But I was going to say that, like, I have that same list as you. I got it from Google, where basically it ranked them all in like order of the least scary to the most scary. So like it has Sixth Sense at the bottom, number 7 as the least scary. But I was going to say that like the first 2 on this list, Sixth Sense and Jaws, they're kind of different from the rest of the movies on this list because like I just feel like the filmmakers are kind of different people than the rest of different filmmakers and the rest of the people on this list. Like I feel
I just listed them in order of when they came out. So
that was good. That was good too. That was good. Yeah. So you have like The Exorcist then as your first one.
Like, because I was going to say The Exorcist and Jaws are 2 years apart, and they are monumental events. They're not just movies. They're like The Exorcist became the biggest movie of the year in 1973. Jaws set all the records at the time. I mean, it would very quickly be defeated by Star Wars, but for a 2-year span, Jaws was the biggest movie of all time. And they got, The Exorcist got 10 Oscar nominations.
It's fucking awesome.
I just read the book, The Exorcist Legacy, by Nate Sagaloff, and he talks about in the book Billy Friedkin, who is a guy we've covered on this channel that we loved. He passed away a couple years ago.
Yeah.
William Friedkin was pissed that he did not win the Oscar for Best Director, and he felt that he was kind of being robbed of that award because of some of his interviews around that time where, he apparently thought he didn't say the right things, or people, and if you know William Friedkin, he's got some personality. But like he harbored a grudge against The Sting, the movie that won Best Picture and Best Director. The Exorcist won 2 Oscars for Best Sound, and William Peter Blatty actually won an Oscar for adapting his own screenplay. And then Jaws won Best editing, Verna Fields, best sound, and then of course John Williams won the Oscar for best score. Um, Weirdly, Spielberg was not nominated for best director
Huh.
for Jaws. It was nominated for best picture though. One of the
Okay.
greatest 5 movies ever put together. It was, I think it's Jaws, Network, Rocky, Taxi. No, I'm confusing that with 76. Jaws lost to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Jesus Christ. The
Yeah,
70s were a fucking different time, man. Holy
which
shit.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest very famously became the second movie to ever sweep the big 5 categories. And then Silence of the Lambs
Boom.
became the third. And that is, as of right now, that is the only horror movie, although I'm sure people will dispute it. It is the only horror movie to ever win Best Picture, along with actor, actress, screenplay, and director Jonathan Demme.
Okay, okay, interesting. So Silence of the Lambs is kind of the wild card in this whole thing, where it's the one that makes it. It's the one that people get. You know, it's like when Return of the King won for Best Picture that year. You know, it's like there's something special about it, even though there's so many great movies that are in this genre. There's something about this that people are like, oh yeah, it's this movie. And we can talk about Silence of the Lambs. I want to talk about Spielberg for 1 second. 2 things going all the way back to what you said at the very beginning of the episode. When people say Jaws isn't horror, I think it's because of us growing up, seeing Jaws, seeing Star Wars, seeing Raiders of the Lost Ark, hearing that John Williams music, and we think of it as a certain type of movie. Oh, this is this kind of movie. This is this like 80s adventurous, fun movie. And that John Williams score. When they were doing Horror's Greatest, they were talking about
I was
scores.
just thinking about that.
They were talking about how there's like this adventurous music in it. And it's the opposite of horror. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
that's it. John Williams in Jaws,
Yeah.
one of the greatest scores of all time. And when you say that out loud, everybody instantly just goes to the Jaws theme. But then you forget that there is, once they leave, once the 3 of them, there's Jaws is 2 movies, 2 halves perfectly put together. You have Amity Island, and then you have the Orca. And once the Orca leaves, the John Williams score is so fun for like the next 35 minutes,
Yeah.
where Hooper is driving the boat and they're chasing the barrels, they're chasing the barrels, and that it's adventure music. But like it also comes back to, of course, the actual Jaws theme itself. And then the opening scene of that movie, the ending of that movie, everything that happens on the island, whether it's the 2 schlubby fishermen who the dock breaks and you're like, oh my God, they're going to get killed. Obviously, the Alex Kintner scene, like these are some of the most legendary moments in horror. And because there's a 30-minute span of the movie that's really fun and adventurous, I'm supposed to throw all of that out.
Right.
But like we were just talking in our last recording, Spielberg does this all the time. Like every Indiana Jones movie that counts has a moment that gave us nightmares as kids.
Yeah.
Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Nazis melting at the end. Basically every fucking scene in Temple of Doom.
Right.
And the last, for me, it was the last scene of Last Crusade, where the villain, the Nazi, drinks out of the wrong grail and like
Yeah.
fucking decomposes.
Right.
Like those scenes were terrifying, and Spielberg has always done that. Like even in like his lesser movies, like War of the Worlds has really scary shit in it. Um, they're one of the greatest moments in a Spielberg movie that never gets talked about is in Minority Report, when the precog that's with Tom Cruise, she turns to him and goes, John, you're gonna have to run now. And then before he can say anything, she just screams run. And it goes right through me. It like gives me like instant it's like the greatest scream I've ever heard in a movie. And
Yeah.
it's he always does that shit. Scorsese does that in his movies. Horror's Greatest talks about After Hours and Taxi Driver. And of course he would later go on to do Shutter Island. Like there's this phrase now, prestige horror, you know, and like you said earlier, like Spielberg didn't set out to like win Oscars with Jaws. If you anybody who knows anything about Jaws, it was it was a fucking nightmare to make,
Right.
and they all thought they would never work again,
Right.
and so for it to come out as good as it did and to be as genuinely scary as it was, it of like it's legitimately one of the greatest movies of all time of any
Yeah.
genre.
Right. And then another thing that's important to point out about Steven Spielberg is that he himself has won Oscars, and like almost always when a film of his comes out, it's nominated for an Oscar for something, whether it's acting, cinematography, the score, directing, obviously, best picture. So his name is often synonymous with the Oscars. You know, so it's interesting for him to make those kind of movies, and yet Jaws, he wasn't trying to do that when he made Jaws, like you just said. And then I think a good way to segue and make sure we're covering The Sixth Sense too is that Shyamalan is clearly influenced by Spielberg. Shyamalan has said before many times that Spielberg is a major influence on him, you know? And once again, I think that when he's making The Sixth Sense, he's not sitting there thinking, oh, maybe I'm going to get an Oscar for this, or, you know, no, he wants to make this compelling, exciting story, and he makes The Sixth Sense. It's a passion project, and it's fucking one of the classics of all time. What did it fucking lose to that year? What was it like? What year is Sixth Sense?
1999. 1999 is genuinely one of the greatest years in film history. It lost to American Beauty, which I can't even really argue. I will argue forever that the 1999 Best Supporting Actor category is 4 of the best performances ever. And then they gave the Oscar to Michael Caine, and it bothers the fuck out of me because Cider House Rules was just like a meh, drama. And Haley Joel Osment as a child was unbelievable in The Sixth Sense. That is, you know, I See Dead People is one of those iconic movie lines that everybody knows. And, you know, at the time, you know, we've talked a lot about M. Night Shyamalan. We had our Summer of Shyamalan with because of Trap last year. And I feel like The Sixth Sense, in a way, almost sabotaged his whole career because of how great the ending was, that it almost feels like he then went ahead and said, okay, now I have to come up with some weird twists in every movie. And it worked for a little bit, and then it kind of started to become its own trope.
Right.
And, you know, his career has had its, you know, vast amounts of ups and downs in the last 25 years now. I mean, 1999 is 26 years ago now. It's 2025. Jesus. But yeah, I mean, like, you can't underestimate how important that movie was when it came out. Like, you talk about like capturing the zeitgeist of the time. Like, Bruce Willis doesn't get an Oscar nomination. I think he's phenomenal in that movie. Weirdly, Toni Collette got an Oscar nomination for that. She is probably, for many people, and this is not even horror fans, but for many people, she's probably one of the great Oscar snubs of all time for her role in Hereditary.
Right. Totally agree. And I mean, it's so she was nominated for supporting actress for The Sixth Sense.
Yeah,
that's fucking okay. That's crazy. No, and that's what ends up happening, right? Is that there are people that like get these amazing performances in horror movies, and then they don't get any recognition in the Oscars. Now, I'm going to use this as a segue because Lupita Nyong'o, she in Us, that's an Oscar worthy. Like she deserves the Oscar for that performance.
100%.
Right, but then here with this year, Mick Bliss says, "I love The Visit." That's a Shyamalan movie. I think that might be my daughter's favorite Shyamalan movie
Yeah,
too. Actually,
now that we both said that's on our list of like favorites.
But what I want to do, Danny, was I wanted to talk about actresses that have gotten the nomination, right? Because didn't Natalie Portman get the nomination for Black Swan?
Natalie Portman won for Black Swan.
Okay, so that kind of segues into my next point is that there's the horror actresses that give these amazing performances and they don't even necessarily get nominated, or at least they lose. And then there are the actresses that do get noticed. And I think it's because of like their career and what they've been in prior, right? And I think that like Black Swan and The Substance are maybe two movies that would be good for us to sort of talk about simultaneously, because I feel like there's overlap with both of them.
Definitely. I also want to mention Kathy Bates, 1990, won the Oscar for playing Annie Wilkes in Misery.
Oh,
so that's
good.
like one of those. But again, Misery is one of Stephen King's adaptations that is not at all supernatural. It's a real world story. So yes, it's a Stephen King. Yes, it's horror, but it's also directed by Rob Reiner, who is a esteemed director. It's Kathy Bates, who Kathy Bates at the time, I don't really know if she was I don't know what she was in really before Misery, but like it just feels like oh, there we go. I was waiting for us to have a technical glitch. What I was saying about the thing is, like Stephen King here, I'll give you a perfect example. Gerald's Game, Doctor Sleep, two of my favorite modern Stephen King adaptations. What Gerald's Game, now I think Gerald's Game came out a year or two too early, because if it had come out a couple years later when Netflix was like actively campaigning for Oscars, I think that she would have been nominated. Carl Gugino. I actually, when I met her at Comic-Con, I told her, I was like, it really sucks that that movie came out on Netflix before they started campaigning for Oscars, because you were so good in it. And she looked at me and I swear to God, she went, I know. I was like, yes. I really appreciated that. Like she fucking gets how fucking awesome she was in that movie. But like Rebecca Ferguson in Doctor Sleep, to me, that is like best supporting actress. Like she's so fucking terrifying in that movie. But Doctor Sleep is about, these kind of psychic vampires that go around, murdering kids. And I get it. And and then of course it's a sequel to The Shining. So you tie in all of the Shining lore to it, and suddenly it could get lost, right? Misery is Rob Reiner adapting a not supernatural at all, real world, actually can happen story. And so the performance, I think, was able to stand out because of that. Black Swan, which is, you mentioned, Black Swan was directed by Darren Aronofsky. Darren Aronofsky was looked at as a kind of a very artsy, almost prestige filmmaker because of his first film Pi drew a lot of attention, but then Requiem for a Dream, which I don't know if Ellen Bernstein got nominated for that, but I feel like that was a movie that everyone knew about. So Black Swan that's another one where it's a horror movie, but then you get it's a psychological thriller. It's a woman. She's not really a horror character. She's just a regular person who's going mad because of all the pressures of and you could kind of work around the horror genre when talking about Black Swan, but everything about Black Swan that you remember is the horror movie parts of it. And Natalie Portman was fucking amazing in it, and she won Best Actress. Yeah, Coralie Farja. So the she directed the movie Revenge, which is on Shudder. And if you will if you saw Revenge, because you cannot forget Revenge. It's fucking it's probably the best rape revenge movie ever made. Um, I can hear you. I hope everybody can hear. Yeah, you only had like a blip where you disappeared. But yeah, Revenge was one of the most beautiful movies about a disgusting topic. The way it's shot in like the desert, and then the ending sequence, which if you've not seen it, I don't want to spoil it, but the ending sequence is such a fucking amazing, long tracking shots, kind of flipping the rape revenge genre on its head. Um, just unbelievable. If it's on Shutter or it was on Shutter, I recommend everybody goes to see that, goes and watches that. But yeah, that was I think her first major film, and I think The Substance might be her second like film that it's second film that I've seen. I just remember when I first heard about The Substance, I was like, holy shit! It's the woman who directed Revenge is doing another horror movie, and I can't wait to see it. And yeah, and all of these movies, while they do like the message is right in your face, it's done for the artistic reason. Like the substance is, I had more fun the second and third time I saw the substance in the movie theater, turning my head to look at other people in the movie theater and watch them react to the things that were on the screen. I took Charlotte to see it. Charlotte's sitting there like not like you can't believe the things that you're seeing in that movie. And then every time you think to yourself, okay, well, it can't get fucking crazier than that. It goes up by like 10 notches. And uh, and the so the sledgehammer to your face is not in the messaging. It's done specifically on purpose, and it's like like shooting you like at the end, right? The end of the substance, where it's like, how do we get across to these freaking, Dennis Quaid and Harvey characters who are so quick to get rid of any woman who, reaches a certain age, who, or, her beauty standards drop ever so slightly. What is the, how do we get through to these people? Oh, we shower them in blood and like leave them screaming and covered in viscera. And it's one of the great fucking moments of I'm not very good at hiding how much I fucking love this movie. Um it's I've seen 8 of the 9 best picture movies this year so far, and it's miles ahead of anything else on my list. Um and I'm holding out hope for Demi Moore. And I'm holding out hope for Coralie to win one of the 2 Oscars that she's nominated for. I don't think she's going to win Best Director. I would love her to win Best Original Screenplay. Um, and Demi Moore, I mean, Demi Moore won the Golden Globe. It made me very happy. I also want to mention, you know, Nosferatu got 4 Oscars, 4 Oscar nominations. Production design, costume, cinematography, makeup. Horror tends to do well in, and science fiction also tends to do well in like effects, makeup, costuming, production design. Like Mad Max Fury Road won like 6 Oscars, but they're all like the technical awards. Dune won all the technical Oscars and may win all the technical Oscars again this year. Alien Romulus is nominated for best, and the Alien franchise I think has 3 different movies nominated for best special effects. Rick Baker was given the first ever makeup Oscar because of American Werewolf in London and the transformation scene. Um, you know, and then I just kind of wrote down some like The Omen won for best original song for um, there's I'm trying to think. We've talked about the 6 movies. Oh, I wanted to just mention I actually did a short review of this movie not too long ago. The first ever horror Academy Award was way back at like the 3rd or 4th ever Oscars. 1931's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Frederick March won Best Actor. Uh, so that's like a neat little piece of trivia. There's two movies that I wanted to mention to you that are not horror movies, but they actually won Best Picture 2 years apart, very recently. One of them is The Shape of Water, and the other one is Parasite. So, The Shape of Water is basically a historical. It it's a, what if the creature from the Black Lagoon was a tool in the Cold War and also a love story. And I don't think I would say, aside from the fact that there is a creature and this underwater creature, I don't think The Shape of Water is in any way a horror movie. But it's obviously, and I'm going to use a phrase that I hate, it obviously has those horror elements. It's literally a fucking underwater creature. And I love that actually won Best Picture over Get Out, the year that Jordan Peele won. And then Bong Joon Ho's Parasite from 2019 has a lot of those horror social commentary elements. Made it. Oh, thank you. All right. That's a great name, by the way. Cuddle Snugglesworth. That's awesome. Uh, Parasite, there are so many parts of Parasite that are stressful, that are so suspenseful, and you almost feel like you're in a home invasion horror movie because they literally invade the home of these rich people, and then it like takes an even darker turn later in the movie. And yeah, like again, Bong Joon-ho has a history with science fiction movies like Snowpiercer, but he also has a history of like really dark, real kind of like real world horror. Memories of a Murder, Mother, one of his first movies, like like really effed up stuff. And uh yes, yeah. The Host is a sci-fi, a monster movie, but all of his movies are full of social commentary, but also, full of genre stuff, from science fiction to horror to suspense to thriller. I can't wait to see Mickey 17, his new movie with Robert Pattinson. Uh, just saw another trailer for that the other day when I saw him. You'll probably see it tonight if you're going to see Companion. No. Pan's Was Pan's Labyrinth nominated? I don't think Pan's Labyrinth was nominated. It might have been nominated for Best Foreign Film because, yeah, because Pan's Labyrinth is another one that like walks the line. It's a war drama, but it's also a fantastical fantasy horror movie. Um, I was actually shocked. I actually went back to see that recently, and by recently I mean like within the last 2 years. And um, okay, and I was genuinely shocked because in my head there's so much more of the fantasy horror in Pan's Labyrinth,
Yeah.
and when I rewatched it, I actually took Charlotte to see it, and the fantasy horror is so few and far between. The
Right.
the really terrifying war movie that's going on, and the real villain of the movie is the
The
general, of
fascist
course.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely. And I mean, if you look at Parasite on paper, if you just wrote the description of Parasite, but you didn't like go too deep into it, it would look like a horror book or a horror movie. Like you just said, with like the people under the stairs, it's a home invasion thing. It's people living in a house, unbeknownst to the people that are living upstairs. Like you know, it's horror on paper,
yeah,
so like I don't know. I think it all comes down to people making movies that are their visions, what they're passionate about, and then maybe people decide it's worthy of an Oscar. But I guess my thesis for this video or whatever is that the Oscars always has this sort of like this is an Oscar movie thing, and it's snobbish, and horror gets it, look down. They look down their noses at horror, like you've said, whereas there's so many horror movies that are like so much better and they don't even get talked about for Oscars at all, but they're so much better than some of the movies that win Best Picture, you
yeah.
know?
I mean, next week I think next week we're going to be doing our top horror movies of 2024,
Yeah.
and there are a couple of the movies on my list that. All right, good. There we go. There's a couple movies on my list. I remember I walked out of the theater after seeing Strange Darling,
Yeah.
and I said, Willa Fitzgerald is going to be this year's Toni Collette. She's going to be that horror genre performance that is so fucking good that gets completely overlooked and gets no recognition. And guess what? I was right. She's gotten no, I mean, no Golden Globes or any of those nominations. It was a low budget movie. It was not like a wide release. I'm sure they didn't campaign, but like that's the type of movie for me where I go in, I watch those performances, her and Kyle Gallner, and I go, holy fuck,
Yep.
they killed it in this movie.
Yep.
My God.
Yep.
And there are, like we've talked about it. I think Chris even mentioned it. It's kind of hard to look at that movie and say it's a horror movie.
Right.
But like, I don't know what else to call it. And those two performances are so great that, like I would have put her performance. I think from the, and I've seen 8 of the Oscar movies. To me, like Willa Fitzgerald in Strange Darling is one of the 5 best female performances I've seen in the movie this year.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, go ahead.
And I just like, yeah, there's going to be movies in this genre that get completely overlooked whenever you talk about awards.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why it's great that we have things like Shudder doing the Chainsaw Awards, like even like not to shout out another much more popular horror movie channel, but like Dead Meat does. They're so popular. They have so many millions of subscribers. They do their own Dead Meat Awards every year now. It's like obviously there's the Saturn Awards. Fangoria does the Chainsaw Awards. That show always goes up on Shudder, and it's like that's like for us. That's our Oscars. So every once in a while, when we get a Substance or a Nosferatu or a Get Out or a, Black Swan that gets to like be next to the King's Speech or, Green Book or, I don't know, A Complete Unknown.
Oh, yeah,
look,
yeah.
I like The Complete Unknown. I really enjoyed that movie, but if you've seen a musical biopic, you've seen them all,
right?
And so, yeah, it was Timothée Chalamet awesome. And is he maybe going to win an Oscar? Yeah, but I thought he was great. The woman who played Joan Baez was awesome. James Mangold, great director. It does nothing overly original. Whereas you'll get a movie like The Substance, Get Out, Black Swan, The Sixth Sense that just completely does things you've never seen before. And when those movies get recognized as a horror fan, it's just the best.
Danny, where's your microphone, man? Because you just got to drop it right now.
Here's my ibuprofen. I'm an old man. I keep ibuprofen next to my bed.
All right, well that was fucking perfect. But I mean, no, dude, you fucking did it. You actually summed it all up perfectly, and you actually even segued into next week's episode. Because next week's episode, we are having our own version. It might not be the Fangoria Awards or the Dead Meat Awards, but we do our top 10 every year. We're probably gonna take 2 fucking hours to record it, and we're gonna go through our top 10 of the year. Spoilers, guys. The Substance is probably going to be on that list, and Strange Darling is going to be on that list too.
Yeah.
But Danny, while we finish up our hour here, do you want to tell people what else is on our channel?
Well, we're gonna do we're gonna do our top 10 of 2024. I saw 2 great horror movies already in 2025. I got shorts up on the channel for the new Valentine's Day slasher Hard Eyes coming out February 7th, and Companion, which is in theaters now. Pete's going to see Companion. If you like it, maybe we'll do a review of that next week. Right. And we just finished recording our final review of this season of Horror's Greatest on Shudder about space horror. And there's a couple David Lynch in memorial videos. One that I recorded at IFC Center, before Mulholland Drive, and then we do a kind of a discussion of Mulholland Drive and like a reflection of David Lynch's career as
Yeah.
well. So that's pretty much everything that's up there right now, and
Yeah.
yeah, can't wait till
Yeah.
next week.
I noticed that there was actually more viewers than usual for this one. We just did 2 videos. We just recorded our horror's greatest, and it didn't have as many viewers. But this one, I keep seeing people pop in, pop out. So thank you guys for watching. I don't know how much of me you saw. According to Nick Blizz, I wasn't around too much, but hopefully you guys enjoyed Danny talking, and he's saying goodbye and good night. You got it, Mick Blizz. But yeah, this is me and Danny, guys. If you haven't subscribed to the Lastercast, please do. We could always use some more views and some more comments. And otherwise, we will see you guys next time.